Maya wiped down the sticky counter for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The coffee shop buzzed with its usual crowd of college students, business people rushing to work, and regulars who treated the place like their personal office. She had been working at Corner Cafe for 3 years now, saving every penny she could while putting herself through community college. The morning rush was always the worst. People were grumpy, demanding, and impatient. Maya had learned to smile through it all, even when customers snapped at her for things beyond her control. Today felt different, though. A group of 4 young men in expensive suits had taken the corner booth, and they had been making her job miserable since they walked in. "Hey, tattoo girl," one of them called out, waving his empty coffee cup in the air. "This coffee tastes like dirt. Bring me something that doesn't suck." Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her professional smile intact. The intricate tattoo on her left forearm was partially visible beneath her rolled-up sleeves. It was something deeply personal to her, but these men had been making jokes about it all morning. She walked over with a fresh pot of their premium blend. "I'm sorry you didn't enjoy the house blend," she said politely. "This is our Ethiopian roast. It's quite popular." The man who seemed to be their leader, a blonde guy with perfectly styled hair, looked her up and down with a smirk. "What's with the war paint on your arm? Trying to look tough or something?" His friends laughed, and Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. The tattoo meant everything to her, but she couldn't exactly explain that to these entitled customers. She poured the coffee without saying a word. "I bet she got it to impress some boyfriend," another one chimed in. "Girls always get tattoos for attention these days." Maya's hand trembled slightly as she finished pouring. She had heard every comment, every assumption, every cruel joke people could make about her appearance. Working in customer service meant swallowing her pride daily, but today it felt particularly hard. "Maybe it's one of those fake ones," the third man suggested with a laugh. "Like the temporary tattoos kids get." The leader of the group leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the entertainment. "Nah, look at her. She probably thinks having ink makes her look cool. Little does she know it just makes her unemployable anywhere decent." Maya wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their comments, but she needed this job. Her college. Tuition wasn't going to pay itself, and she had bills to cover. She had learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when her paycheck depended on keeping customers happy. "Is there anything else I can get for you, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "Yeah, maybe cover up that thing on your arm," the blonde one said. "It's kind of gross to look at while we're eating." His friends erupted in laughter again, and Maya felt something inside her crack. She had dealt with rude customers before, but this felt different, more personal, more cruel. She was about to respond when she noticed an older man sitting alone at a nearby table. He had been there for about an hour, quietly reading a newspaper and sipping his black coffee. Unlike the noisy group, he was well-dressed, but in an understated way. His gray hair was neatly combed, and there was something about his posture that suggested military background. The man looked up from his paper, and Maya caught his eye for just a moment. There was something in his expression that she couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity, but it wasn't indifference either. He seemed to be paying attention to what was happening at the corner booth. Maya turned back to the group of men who were still chuckling at their own jokes. She refilled their water glasses and cleared away their empty plates, enduring more comments about her appearance and her tattoo. Each remark felt like a small cut, but she kept working. The cafe started to empty out as the lunch rush ended. The group in the corner booth seemed to be settling in for a long business meeting, spreading papers across their table and talking loudly about deals and money. Maya tried to focus on her other customers, but their voices carried across the small space. The older gentleman continued reading his paper, occasionally glancing in Maya's direction. She wondered what he was thinking. Did he agree with the cruel comments? Was he judging her too? In her experience, older customers were often the most critical of her generation's choices. As the afternoon wore on, Maya found herself dreading every trip to the corner booth. The men's comments had shifted from her tattoo to her appearance in general, then to assumptions about her intelligence and her future. They seemed to think she couldn't hear them, or maybe they just didn't care. Girls like that never amount to anything, she heard one of them say. They make bad choices and then wonder why they're stuck serving coffee. Maya bit her tongue and continued cleaning tables. She thought about her late nights studying, her perfect attendance record at school, and her dreams of becoming a nurse. These men knew nothing about her, yet they felt qualified to judge her entire life based on how she looked. The quiet older gentleman finally stood up, folding his newspaper carefully. Maya watched him walk toward the counter to pay his bill. Up close, she could see that his clothes were expensive but practical, and his shoes were polished to a military shine. "Thank you for the excellent service," he said quietly, handing her exact change plus a generous tip. Maya looked up at him, surprised by the genuine kindness in his voice. After hours of cruel comments, simple politeness felt like a gift. "You're welcome," she replied. "Have a great day, sir." He nodded and turned to leave, but then paused and looked back at her. His eyes moved briefly to her tattoo, and something shifted in his expression. Maya couldn't tell if it was recognition, curiosity, or something else entirely. The older man glanced toward the corner booth where the four men were still talking loudly, then back at Maya. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something. Instead, he simply nodded again and walked toward the door. Maya watched him go, wondering about the look she had seen in his eyes. Little did she know that this quiet customer had noticed far more than she realized, and that their paths would cross again very soon. The next morning brought another wave of the usual customers, but Maya couldn't stop thinking about the older gentleman from yesterday. Something about the way he had looked at her tattoo stuck in her mind. Most people either stared rudely or tried not to look at all, but his reaction had been different. She was wiping down tables when the four men from yesterday walked in again. Maya's heart sank. They took the same corner booth and immediately started their loud conversation about business deals and weekend plans. Maya approached their table with coffee, hoping they would be less cruel today. "Well, if it isn't our tattooed waitress again," the blonde leader said with a grin. "Did you think about our advice, maybe invest in some long sleeves?" His friends laughed, and Maya forced herself to smile. "Good morning, gentlemen. The usual coffee and breakfast?" "Yeah, but try not to let that thing on your arm touch our food," one of them said, pointing at her tattoo. "Who knows where it's been?" Maya's face burned with embarrassment, but she took their order without comment. As she walked away, she heard them continuing their conversation about her. "I still can't figure out what that design is supposed to be," one said. "Looks like some kind of military thing, but girls don't serve in combat." "Probably copied it from some movie," another suggested. "These people always want to look tough without actually doing anything tough." Maya gripped the coffee pot tighter as she poured coffee for other customers. The tattoo on her arm was a memorial piece, something deeply meaningful that honored someone very important to her. These men's casual dismissal of its significance felt like they were dismissing a part of her soul. Around 10 o'clock, the quiet older gentleman from yesterday walked in again. He chose a different table this time, one with a clearer view of the corner booth. Maya brought him coffee and his usual newspaper, grateful for at least one customer who treated her with basic respect. "Thank you, miss," he said politely, but Maya noticed his attention seemed divided. His eyes kept moving toward the group of loud men. As the morning progressed, the four men's comments became increasingly personal and cruel. They seemed to be competing to see who could make the most cutting remarks about Maya's appearance, her intelligence, and her life choices. "Girls with tattoos like that usually have daddy issues," one of them announced loudly enough for half the cafe to hear. "Probably never had a real father figure." Maya's hands shook as she refilled their water glasses. The comment hit closer to home than they could possibly know. She set the pitcher down carefully, not trusting herself to speak. "Or maybe she's trying to honor some dead boyfriend," another one added with a laugh. "You know how dramatic young people get about everything." The older gentleman's newspaper rustled sharply. Maya glanced over and saw that he had lowered it completely, watching the scene with obvious disapproval. His jaw was set in a hard line, and his hands were clenched on the table. Maya tried to focus on her work, but the comments kept coming. The four men seemed energized by their own cruelty, each joke building on the last. They talked about her as if she wasn't even human, just entertainment for their morning coffee. "I bet she doesn't even know what that tattoo means," the leader said. "Probably just picked it because it looked cool in the tattoo parlor book." "Yeah, these kids have no respect for real symbols," another agreed. "They turn everything into fashion statements." Maya felt tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break down. She had endured worse things than cruel words, and she would endure this too. The older gentleman stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Maya watched as he walked purposefully toward the corner booth where the four men sat. His military bearing was more obvious now, his shoulders straight and his step confident. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said in a calm but authoritative voice. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The four men looked up, slightly annoyed at the interruption. The blonde leader gave the older man a dismissive look. "Can we help you with something, old man?" he asked rudely. The older gentleman's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I was wondering if you might lower your voices. Some of us are trying to enjoy our coffee in peace." "This is a public place," one of the men said with a snort. "We can talk as loud as we want." "Of course you can," the older man agreed. "I was simply making a polite request." Maya watched the exchange nervously. She didn't want this kind customer getting into trouble because of her. The four men seemed like the type who would complain to management or cause a scene. "Look, buddy," the leader said, leaning back in his chair. "We're having a private business meeting here. Why don't you mind your own business?" The older gentleman nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. It's just that your comments about the young lady's tattoo have been quite loud, and I found them rather interesting." Maya's stomach dropped. Was he going to join in on their cruel jokes? She had thought he was different, but maybe she had been wrong. "Oh, you noticed the war paint too?" one of the men said with a laugh. "Pretty ridiculous, right? Girls these days think tattoos make them look tough." "Actually," the older gentleman said quietly, "I was thinking something quite different." He paused and looked directly at Maya, who was standing frozen by the coffee station. There was something in his eyes that she couldn't identify, but it wasn't mockery or judgment. "You see, gentlemen," he continued, turning back to the four men, "I have some experience with military symbols and honors, and that young lady's tattoo is quite remarkable." The blonde leader rolled his eyes. "Come on, old man. She probably got it at some strip mall tattoo shop. It doesn't mean anything." The older gentleman smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I think you might be surprised. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that none of you have any idea what that symbol actually represents." Maya's heart was racing. How could this stranger know anything about her tattoo? She had never seen him before yesterday, and they had barely spoken. "Enlighten us, then," one of the men said sarcastically. "What's so special about some random ink?" The older gentleman looked back at Maya, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. It was recognition, respect, and something that looked almost like pride. "That's not just any tattoo," he said quietly. "That's a memorial piece. And if I'm not mistaken, it honors someone who made the ultimate sacrifice for this country." The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. Maya stared at the older gentleman in shock, her heart pounding. How could he possibly know that? Maya felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The older gentleman's words hung in the air, and every person in the cafe seemed to be holding their breath. The four men at the corner booth looked confused and slightly uncomfortable, for the first time since they had been coming to the cafe. "What are you talking about?" the blonde leader asked, his voice less confident than before. The older gentleman stepped closer to their table, his posture straight and commanding. "I'm talking about respect, son, something that seems to be in short supply at this table." Maya's hands trembled as she gripped the counter. She couldn't believe this stranger was defending her, especially when he seemed to understand something about her tattoo that she had never told anyone. "Look, we were just having some fun," one of the men said, backpedaling slightly. "No harm meant." "No harm." The older gentleman's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "You've spent 2 days mocking this young woman and making Assumptions about something you clearly don't understand. Maya watched as he turned to look at her again. His eyes moved to her forearm, where the tattoo was partially visible beneath her rolled-up sleeve. The design was intricate and meaningful, every line carefully chosen to honor someone special. "Would you mind if I took a closer look at that tattoo, miss?" he asked gently. Maya hesitated. She had spent years hiding the full meaning of her tattoo from strangers, protecting herself from exactly the kind of cruel comments she had been enduring. But something about this man felt different. Safe. She walked over slowly and extended her arm. The older gentleman examined the tattoo carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail he noticed. "Just as I thought," he said softly. "This is a memorial piece for a fallen soldier." The four men at the corner booth shifted uncomfortably. Their earlier confidence was evaporating as they realized they might have seriously misjudged the situation. "The eagle at the top represents honor and freedom," the older gentleman continued, pointing to different elements of the design. "These dog tags incorporated into the wings are authentic, aren't they?" Maya nodded, unable to speak. She couldn't believe this stranger was reading her tattoo like a book, understanding every symbol and its meaning. "And this inscription along the bottom," he said, his voice becoming even gentler. "It's a military motto, but it's been personalized. This commemorates someone very specific, someone who meant everything to you." Tears began to well up in Maya's eyes. For 3 years she had carried this memorial on her arm, and no one had ever understood what it truly represented. People saw the military symbols and made assumptions, but they never grasped the personal story behind each carefully chosen element. "How do you know all this?" Maya whispered. The older gentleman smiled kindly. "Because I've seen many memorial tattoos over the years, and I've learned to recognize the difference between meaningful tributes and random designs. This piece tells a story of love, loss, and honor." He turned back to the four men, who were now looking distinctly uncomfortable. "So when you gentlemen mock this young lady's tattoo, you're not just insulting her personal choice. You're disrespecting the memory of someone who died serving our country." The blonde leader opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His friends looked equally stunned, finally beginning to understand the gravity of their behavior. "I don't think you understand," one of them tried to say. "We didn't know it was—" "You didn't know because you didn't care to know," the older gentleman interrupted firmly. "You saw a young woman with a tattoo and decided that gave you the right to judge her, mock her, and treat her as less than human." Maya wiped at her eyes, trying to compose herself. The other customers in the cafe were watching the scene unfold, and she felt exposed and vulnerable. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should get back to work." "Wait," the older gentleman said gently. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, but also something else. A small, worn photograph. Maya looked at the photo and gasped. It showed a much younger version of the man standing before her, dressed in military uniform and standing next to another soldier. But it was the second soldier that made her heart stop. "Is that—" she began, unable to finish the question. The older gentleman nodded solemnly. "Staff Sergeant Michael Chen. I served with him in Afghanistan. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever had the privilege to know." Maya's legs felt weak. Michael Chen, her brother. The inspiration for every element of her tattoo. The reason she had chosen nursing as her career path. The memory that drove her to be better every single day. "You knew my brother?" she whispered. "I was his commanding officer," the man replied. "Captain James Morrison, retired. And Michael talked about his little sister every single day. He was so proud of you, Maya." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You know my name?" Captain Morrison smiled. "He showed me pictures constantly. You were getting ready to graduate high school when I last saw him. He said you wanted to be a nurse, that you were going to help people just like he was serving his country." The four men at the corner booth looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. They had gone from mocking what they thought was a meaningless tattoo to realizing they had been insulting the memory of a war hero. "Michael saved my life," Captain Morrison continued, his voice filled with emotion. "And the lives of 6 other soldiers. He didn't make it home, but he died protecting the people he cared about. Maya couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She had never met anyone who had known Michael during his service. Her family had received official reports and letters, but they had never spoken to someone who had actually served alongside him. He used to say that his sister was going to change the world, Captain Morrison said, that she was stronger than anyone knew, and that she would make a difference in people's lives. Maya looked down at her tattoo, seeing it through new eyes. Every element had been chosen to honor Michael's memory, but she had never imagined that someone who knew him would recognize the tribute. "I've been putting myself through nursing school," she said softly. "It's taking longer than I planned, but I'm getting there." "Michael would be so proud," Captain Morrison said, "and he would be furious about how these gentlemen have been treating you." The 4 men at the corner booth finally seemed to find their voices, but their earlier arrogance had completely disappeared. "We had no idea," the blonde leader said quietly. "We're really sorry." Captain Morrison turned to face them, his expression stern but not unkind. "Sorry isn't enough, gentlemen. This young woman has been serving you with professionalism and courtesy, while you've been treating her with cruelty and disrespect." Maya watched as the reality of the situation sank in for all 4 men. They had spent 2 days mocking a memorial to a fallen soldier, insulting his sister and showing their true character to everyone in the cafe. The silence in the cafe was deafening. Maya looked around and realized that every customer and employee was watching the scene unfold. Some looked shocked, others appeared moved by the revelation about her brother's service and sacrifice. Captain Morrison placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Your brother used to carry your picture in his helmet," he said softly. "He said you were his reminder of what he was fighting for, what he wanted to protect." Maya's tears fell freely now, but they weren't tears of embarrassment anymore. For the first time in years, someone understood the weight she carried, the loss that had shaped every decision she had made since Michael's death. The 4 men at the corner booth looked like they were shrinking into themselves. The blonde leader cleared his throat nervously. "We really didn't know," he repeated, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "If we had understood what the tattoo meant." "But you didn't care to understand," Captain Morrison said firmly. "That's the point. You saw something that looked different to you and decided that gave you the right to mock and judge." Maya wiped her eyes with her sleeve and tried to compose herself. "I should really get back to work," she said quietly. "My manager will be upset if I'm not serving customers." "Where is your manager?" Captain Morrison asked. "In the back office," Maya replied. "He's usually busy with paperwork during the morning shift." Captain Morrison walked toward the back of the cafe, leaving Maya standing near the corner booth with the 4 men who had been tormenting her. They looked completely different now, their faces pale and their usual confident demeanor, replaced by obvious shame. "Listen," the blonde leader said awkwardly. "We really are sorry. We had no idea about your brother." Maya looked at him steadily. "Would it have mattered if he wasn't a soldier?" she asked quietly. "Would you have treated me differently if my tattoo was just something personal to me, not a military memorial?" The man opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. His friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing that Maya had just exposed the real problem with their behavior. "That's what I thought," Maya said. She didn't sound angry anymore, just tired and disappointed. Captain Morrison returned with a middle-aged man in a manager's shirt following behind him. The manager, whose name tag read Pete, looked confused and concerned. "Maya, is everything all right?" Pete asked. "This gentleman said there was some kind of situation?" "These 4 customers have been harassing your employee for 2 days, Captain Morrison explained calmly, making cruel comments about her appearance and specifically mocking a memorial tattoo honoring her brother, who died serving in Afghanistan. Pete's expression darkened as he looked at the 4 men. "Is this true?" The corner booth erupted in defensive voices, all talking at once, but their explanations sounded weak and pathetic compared to the dignity with which Maya had endured their abuse. "We were just joking around," one of them said. "We didn't mean anything serious by it." "Jokes are supposed to be funny," Pete replied coldly. Harassing my employees isn't funny, it's unacceptable. Maya had never seen her manager take such a strong stand for any of his employees. Pete was usually focused on keeping customers happy, even when they were clearly wrong. Maya is one of my best workers, Pete continued. She's professional, hardworking, and she treats every customer with respect, even when they don't deserve it. Captain Morrison nodded approvingly. She's been serving these gentlemen with grace and professionalism, while they've been treating her terribly. The other customers in the cafe began to murmur among themselves. Maya could hear snippets of conversations, expressing support for her and disapproval of the four men's behavior. I think you gentlemen need to leave, Pete said firmly, and don't bother coming back. Now wait just a minute, the blonde leader protested, his business instincts kicking in. We're regular customers here. We spend a lot of money. Money doesn't give you the right to abuse my staff, Pete replied. I'd rather have one respectful customer than four who think their wallets make them better than other people. Maya watched in amazement as her manager actually stood up to difficult customers. She had never seen this side of Pete before, and it meant more to her than he could possibly know. Captain Morrison reached into his wallet and pulled out several business cards. Actually, before they leave, I think these gentlemen might benefit from learning something. He handed a card to each of the four men. Maya could see that they were business cards, but she couldn't read what they said from where she stood. I'm the Regional Director for Veterans Affairs, Captain Morrison explained. Part of my job involves educating people about the sacrifices made by military families. The four men looked at the cards with growing alarm. Maya could see the wheels turning in their heads as they realized they had just insulted a veteran and the sister of a fallen soldier in front of a high-ranking VA official. Perhaps you'd be interested in volunteering some of your time to help veteran families in need, Captain Morrison suggested. His tone was polite, but there was an underlying steel that made it clear this wasn't really a request. Or maybe you'd like to make a donation to the Memorial Fund for Fallen Soldiers, he continued. I'm sure Maya's brother and the other heroes we've lost would appreciate your support. Maya realized what Captain Morrison was doing. He wasn't just defending her, he was giving these men a chance to make amends in a meaningful way. Of course, the blonde leader said quickly. We'd be happy to contribute. And volunteer, another one added hastily. Captain Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. Excellent. I'll be in touch with details about how you can help honor the memory of people like Staff Sergeant Michael Chen. Maya watched as the four men gathered their papers and prepared to leave. They looked nothing like the confident, cruel group that had walked in that morning. As they reached the door, the blonde leader turned back. Maya, he called out. We really are sorry. About everything. Maya nodded but didn't respond. Some apologies came too late, and some lessons were learned only after causing unnecessary pain. After the men left, the cafe slowly returned to its normal buzz of conversation. Other customers approached Maya to offer words of support and to thank her for her service in a different way, as the sister of a fallen hero. You don't have to get back to work right away, Pete told her. Take as much time as you need. Maya looked at Captain Morrison, who was still standing beside her. How? Did you recognize the tattoo? She asked. I've made it my business to learn about memorial tattoos, he replied. Too many people see them and make the same assumptions those men did. But everyone tells a story of love and loss. He paused and looked directly into her eyes. Michael used to say that his little sister was going to save more lives than he ever could. He said you had a gift for caring about people. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had always wondered if Michael would be proud of the path she had chosen, if he would approve of how she was trying to honor his memory. He was right, Captain Morrison said with a smile. And I think it's time the world knew just how special Michael's little sister really is. Captain Morrison sat down at his usual table and gestured for Maya to join him. Pete nodded approvingly and told her to take all the time she needed. The cafe had returned to its normal atmosphere, but Maya could feel the supportive glances from other customers. Tell me about nursing school, Captain Morrison said gently. Michael always said you were going to be incredible at helping people heal. Maya settled into the chair across from him, still processing everything that had just happened. "It's been harder than I expected," she admitted. "The classes are tough, and working here while going to school means everything takes longer." "How much longer do you have?" he asked. "2 more years if I can keep taking classes part-time," Maya replied. "I wanted to go full-time, but I can't afford it without this job." Captain Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Michael mentioned that your parents passed away when you were young. He said you'd been on your own since he enlisted." Maya's throat tightened. "Car accident when I was 16. Michael was already in the Army, but he wanted to come home and take care of me. I convinced him to stay and serve. I said I could handle things on my own." "And you have," Captain Morrison said with admiration. "Working your way through school, supporting yourself, honoring your brother's memory. That takes incredible strength." Maya looked down at her tattoo, tracing one of the design elements with her finger. "Some days I wonder if I made the right choice pushing him to stay in the Army. If he had come home, he would have made the same choice anyway," Captain Morrison said firmly. Michael believed deeply in his mission. He wanted to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, including you. Maya looked up at him. "What was he like as a soldier?" Captain Morrison's expression softened. "Brave, dedicated, and always thinking about others first. He volunteered for the most dangerous missions because he said someone with a family waiting at home shouldn't have to take those risks." "That sounds like Michael," Maya said with a sad smile. "He was always trying to take care of everyone else." "The day he died," Captain Morrison continued carefully, "we were evacuating civilians from a village under attack. Michael saw an IED that the rest of us missed. He could have taken cover, saved himself. Instead, he threw himself on it to protect the children who were running behind us." Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but they were different tears now. Pride mixed with grief in a way that felt both painful and healing. "6 children made it home to their families because of your brother's choice," Captain Morrison said. "And my team made it home to ours. Michael saved all of us." Maya wiped her eyes and looked around the cafe where she had been working for 3 years. "I never told anyone here about Michael," she said. "I thought if people knew about the tattoo, they might treat me differently, feel sorry for me or something." "You shouldn't have to hide who you are or who you've lost," Captain Morrison replied. "Your brother's sacrifice is part of your story, and it's a story worth honoring." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Speaking of honoring Michael's story, I have something that might interest you." Maya took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a brochure for a scholarship program she had never heard of. "The Michael Chen Memorial Nursing Scholarship," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "We established it last year, Captain," Morrison explained. "It's for family members of fallen soldiers who are pursuing careers in healthcare. The goal is to help them complete their education without the financial stress that often forces people to give up their dreams." Maya stared at the brochure in disbelief. "There's a scholarship named after my brother?" "Michael's unit raised money for it after he died," Captain Morrison said. "They wanted his sacrifice to continue making a difference. The scholarship covers full tuition, books, and living expenses for the final 2 years of nursing school." Maya's hands shook as she read through the details. "I don't understand. How did you know I was going to school for nursing?" Captain Morrison smiled. "I didn't know you were here until yesterday, but when I saw your tattoo and realized who you were, I knew exactly what I needed to do." "You mean this scholarship was already established? Before you met me?" "The program exists," Captain Morrison confirmed, "but I have some discretion in selecting recipients, and I can't think of anyone who would be more deserving than Michael's little sister." Maya felt overwhelmed by the possibility of finishing school without the constant stress of working and studying simultaneously. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let us help you finish what you started," Captain Morrison replied. "Say you'll let Michael's sacrifice continue to make a difference in the world." Maya looked at her tattoo again, thinking about all the elements she had chosen to represent her brother's life and values. "He would want me to help other people," she said softly. "He would want you to succeed," Captain Morrison corrected. "And he would want you to know that you're not alone in carrying his memory." Pete appeared at their table with a fresh pot of coffee. "Everything okay over here?" he asked with concern. Maya looked up at her manager with new appreciation. "Pete, I might need to reduce my hours here. I just found out about a scholarship opportunity." "That's wonderful news," Pete said with genuine excitement. "You're one of the smartest people I know, Maya. You belong in nursing school full-time." Maya was surprised by Pete's enthusiasm. She had always assumed he saw her as just another employee, someone to fill shifts and serve coffee. "I've been hoping you'd find a way to focus more on school," Pete continued. "You're too talented to be stuck here forever, no offense to the cafe." Captain Morrison chuckled. "It sounds like you have quite a support system here." "I guess I never realized," Maya said, looking around at the familiar space where she had spent so many hours. Several regular customers were watching their conversation with interest, and she could see genuine care in their faces. An elderly woman at a nearby table leaned over. "Honey, I've been coming here for 2 years, and you always remember my order and ask about my grandkids. You're going to make a wonderful nurse." Other customers began to chime in with words of encouragement. Maya realized that while she had been focusing on the few cruel customers like the 4 men from earlier, she had been surrounded by people who appreciated and supported her without her even knowing it. "See?" Captain Morrison said with a smile. "Michael was right about you inspiring people to be better." Maya felt a sense of community and belonging that she hadn't experienced since before her parents died. She had been so focused on surviving and pushing forward that she hadn't noticed the connections she had been building along the way. "When would the scholarship start?" Maya asked, looking down at the brochure again. "Next semester, if you're ready," Captain Morrison replied. "There would be a ceremony where you'd meet some of Michael's unit members. They've all been wondering about his little sister." The thought of meeting soldiers who had served with Michael was both exciting and terrifying. "What if I'm not what they're expecting?" Maya asked. "You're exactly what they're expecting," Captain Morrison assured her. "Michael talked about your strength, your compassion, and your determination. They already know who you are." Maya thought about the years she had spent working multiple jobs, studying late into the night, and pushing herself through the hardest parts of her education. She had done it all while carrying the weight of grief and the desire to honor Michael's memory. "There's one more thing," Captain Morrison said, reaching into his pocket again. This time he pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What's that?" "Michael asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened to him, Captain," Morrison said gently. "I've been carrying it for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." With trembling hands, Maya opened the box. Inside was a simple gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like a nurse's cap. Engraved on the back were the words, "My hero, love, Michael." Maya burst into tears, clutching the necklace to her chest. "He bought this for me?" "He said he knew you'd become a nurse someday, and he wanted you to have something to remind you that he believed in your dreams," Captain Morrison explained. Pete quietly placed a box of tissues on the table and stepped back to give Maya space to process the emotional moment. Other customers were wiping their own eyes, moved by the scene unfolding before them. "I can't believe he had this made," Maya whispered, holding the pendant up to the light. "How did he afford it on a soldier's salary?" "He saved for months," Captain Morrison said. "He said his little sister deserved something special to mark her achievement." Maya fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of Michael's love and faith in her future. Combined with the scholarship opportunity, it felt like her brother was still finding ways to support and encourage her dreams. "So what do you say?" Captain Morrison asked. "Are you ready to let Michael's sacrifice continue changing lives through your work as a nurse?" Maya looked around the cafe one more time, taking in the faces of customers and co-workers who had become an unexpected family. Then she looked down at her tattoo and touched the new necklace around her throat. "Yes," she said with confidence. "I'm ready to make Michael proud." 2 years later, Maya stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the cap on her crisp white nursing uniform. The gold necklace Michael had chosen for her caught the morning light, and she touched it gently before checking her appearance one final time. Today was her first day as a registered nurse at City General Hospital, and she could hardly believe the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scholarship program had allowed her to focus entirely on her studies, graduating at the top of her nursing class with honors. She looked at her reflection and smiled, remembering the scared young woman who had served coffee while enduring cruel comments about her tattoo. That person felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 2 years since Captain Morrison had walked into the cafe and changed everything. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from Pete. "Proud of you, kid. Break a leg today. The coffee. Shop will never be the same without you." She had continued working part-time at the cafe throughout her accelerated program, but now those days were officially behind her. Pete had thrown her a goodbye party last week, and Maya had been amazed by how many regular customers showed up to wish her well. Another text appeared, this one from Captain Morrison. "Michael would be bursting with pride today. Go save some lives, Maya." Maya gathered her things and headed out to her car, the same old Honda that had gotten her through years of school and work. She had been able to keep it running with help from a mechanic who gave her a discount after hearing her story from other customers at the cafe. The drive to the hospital took her past the cafe, and Maya couldn't help but glance over as she drove by. Through the window, she could see the corner booth where those 4 men had sat 2 years ago. She wondered sometimes what had happened to them, whether they had followed through on their promises to volunteer and donate to veteran causes. Captain Morrison had told her 6 months later that all 4 men had indeed become regular volunteers at veteran events and had donated substantial amounts to military family support programs. Maya had been surprised to learn that people could change so dramatically. But Captain Morrison had explained that sometimes people needed a shock to their system to realize how their behavior affected others. They learned that their actions have consequences, he had told her, and more importantly, they learned that every person has a story worth respecting. Maya parked at the hospital and took a moment to collect herself before walking inside. The building was massive and intimidating, but she felt ready for the challenge ahead. Her clinical rotations had prepared her well, and she had already received praise from several supervising nurses for her compassion and skill. As she walked through the lobby, Maya noticed an elderly man sitting alone in one of the waiting room chairs. He looked anxious and confused, clutching a piece of paper with what appeared to be appointment information. "Excuse me," Maya said gently, approaching him. "Are you looking for somewhere specific? I might be able to help you find your way." The man looked up with relief. "Oh, thank you, dear. I'm supposed to be at cardiology for my appointment, but this place is so big. I've been walking around for 20 minutes. Maya checked his paperwork and smiled. "You're actually very close. Cardiology is just down this hallway and to the right. Would you like me to walk with you?" "That would be wonderful," the man said gratefully. "My daughter usually comes with me to these appointments, but she's out of town today." As they walked together, Maya learned that the man was a retired teacher named Mr. Williams. He had been coming to the hospital for heart treatments and was nervous about facing the appointment alone. "You remind me of one of my former students," Mr. Williams said as they reached the cardiology department. "She had your same kind spirit, always looking out for others." Maya helped him check in at the reception desk and made sure he was comfortable, before continuing on to her own destination. It felt natural to stop and help someone who needed assistance, just as it had felt natural to serve customers with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. The nursing supervisor for Maya's floor was a woman named Janet Rodriguez, who had a reputation for being tough but fair. She greeted Maya with a firm handshake and a welcoming smile. "So you're our new graduate," Janet said, looking at Maya's file. "I've heard good things about you from your clinical supervisors." "Thank you," Maya replied. "I'm excited to start working here." Janet led Maya through the medical surgical floor, explaining protocols and introducing her to other staff members. Maya was impressed by the teamwork and professionalism she observed, feeling grateful to be joining such a dedicated group of healthcare workers. "One more thing," Janet said as they completed the tour. "I understand you have some personal connection to military service?" Maya nodded. "My brother was a soldier. He died in Afghanistan." "We have a lot of veteran patients on this floor," Janet explained. Sometimes they connect better with staff who understand their experiences. I thought you should know. Maya touched her necklace and thought about Michael. She had chosen nursing partly to honor his memory, but also because she genuinely wanted to help people heal and feel cared for during difficult times. Her first patient assignment was an elderly veteran named Frank, who had been admitted for complications from diabetes. When Maya introduced herself and he noticed her tattoo, his entire demeanor changed. "Is that a memorial piece?" Frank asked respectfully. "Yes, sir," Maya replied. "For my brother, Staff Sergeant Michael Chen." Frank's eyes lit up with recognition and respect. "A fallen hero. Thank you for his service and for yours in continuing his legacy." Maya spent extra time with Frank that day, listening to his stories about his own military service and making sure he understood his treatment plan. She realized that Captain Morrison had been right about her ability to connect with people who had military experiences. During her lunch break, Maya sat in the hospital cafeteria and reflected on the path that had brought her here. She thought about the cruel comments she had endured, the kindness of strangers like Captain Morrison, and the support of people like Pete who had believed in her potential. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see an unknown number with a local area code. "Hello?" she answered. "Maya? This is David Chen. I think we might be related." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "Related how?" "Michael Chen was my cousin," the voice said. "I've been trying to find you for months. Captain Morrison gave me your number and said you might be willing to meet." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had assumed that Michael was her only remaining family, but apparently there were relatives she had never known about. "I'd love to meet you," she said softly. "Great," David replied. "I have so many stories about Michael from when we were kids, and I'd love to hear about the amazing things you've been doing to honor his memory." As Maya ended the call and returned to work, she realized that her story was still being written. The tattoo that had once made her a target for cruel jokes had become a bridge to new relationships and opportunities she never could have imagined. Walking back onto the hospital floor, Maya passed a mirror in the hallway. She paused for a moment to look at her reflection, seeing not just a young woman in scrubs, but a survivor, a graduate, a nurse, and the proud sister of a fallen hero. Michael had been right all along. She was going to change the world, one patient at a time, carrying his memory and values with her every step of the way. And she was no longer doing it alone.